Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. Well, today on the show, we're going to talk a little about corn herbicides. You've got the HPPD family, and then there's status. Which one is the best for your farm? We'll talk about that today.
And that debate about corn herbicides may come into play with our Weed of the Week. We'll show you which herbicides work best on this tough weed later in the show. But first, here's our farm basics.
Out here, great yield starts with great weed control. That's why I choose the Roundup Ready Extend crop system, the system that makes the difference, because only I know what it takes out here. Yield's what it's all for. But keeping my fields clean all season, that's what it's all about. This is my field.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about how to spray 2,4-D safely around the farmyard.
Yeah, this would have been really helpful for you, Brian, back, I don't know, about 40 years ago when you started spraying 2,4-D.
Yep, I killed my mom's flowers, killed her garden, dropped leaves off trees. I killed all kinds of stuff. Now, that wasn't necessarily 100% my fault.
See, here we go. This is exactly what he told Dad, too, at that time, that, hey, it's not my fault. But you know what? Honestly, 2,4-D does move around a little bit, and that's why we're talking about it today.
And honestly, whoever sprays it, it is your fault if it ends up on a non-target plant. So the thing that you have to understand about 2,4-D is this. It has volatility. And what that means is it can land somewhere, right where you wanted it to land, but then it can actually pick up and move after that point. Now, that picking up and moving usually happens within the first 24 hours. It's possible it could happen within 72 hours, but generally speaking, it's within the first 24 hours. And what we're after with 2,4-D is it's either got to get absorbed and fully absorbed into the plant, or it has to get rained into the ground. One or the other, and then there's no more volatility risk.
Well, the other thing is when you have a windy day like today, you've got to be smart about things. If it's windy enough that you're wondering, is it windy enough I should quit spraying? The answer is yes. You shouldn't be spraying at all if you're worried about, hey, it might be too windy today. But if you say, you know, it's just this tiny little 3-mile-an-hour breeze, then you want to pay attention which direction it's coming out of. Let's say, for example, that it's coming out of the north, and you're spraying further south than everything else around your yard that's susceptible to 2,4-D. Go ahead and spray because the wind is pushing it away from anything that's susceptible.
But as Darren says that, here's the problem with this volatility thing that we talk about. Let's say you're spraying in the evening because the wind's died down. If you spray in the evening, just understand that your product is not going to be rain fast for at least 12 hours and probably 18 hours. Here's why. When you have evening sprays, then humidity is generally speaking coming up. Sometimes there's even dew starting to form on the plants at that point. Well, when you get done spraying, there's usually a lot of dew on the plants, okay? When the humidity is high and there's dew on the plants, you're not going to get real great absorption of that herbicide. So it's going to remain sitting on the leaf. So here's what you have to be thinking about. What happens if tomorrow the wind switches, changes direction, and it's coming out of the south? You get a little volatility. Well, now you can actually have an issue. So when you're spraying 2,4-D, or at least the old 2,4-D, we would just encourage you to take a look at what is the wind direction for the next 48 hours after you spray. As long as it's away from sensitive plants, generally speaking, you're in pretty good shape.
Now here's the other thing. Brian mentions the old 2,4-D. Now we're talking about amines and esters. There is a new formulation of 2,4-D called 2,4-D choline in a product like Freelex that has taken away a lot of that volatility. Now I'm not going to say zero volatility, but I'm going to say it's tremendously different. You won't even know that it's a 2,4-D with the way this one stays put.
With old 2,4-D, what we've always told people is spray really early in the spring, spray late in the fall, when you don't have flowers blooming, leaves on trees, you know, other sensitive plants that might be around the farmyard. Okay, with the new 2,4-D choline or Freelex, we would tell you, you know what, I don't have a real big issue as long as you're using Freelex in the summertime and you're at least a little bit careful with it. I think you should be in pretty good shape. So one last thing that I wanted to mention here, we're talking about safety to plants today. I also want to bring up safety to humans. Just understand 2,4-D choline is not that dangerous a product or anything, but nevertheless, we always encourage you, wear your personal protective equipment.
Spraying 2,4-D around the yard is really important, especially if you have a weed like our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Do you feel like there's never enough time to get everything done before planting? The window for spring work is quick and unforgiving. Give yourself the upper hand with the ProTill High Performance High Speed Disc. More and more farmers agree the ProTill is the right tool for Springfield conditions and heavy residue management. Zero maintenance bearings, independent disc technology, oversized pins and bushings allow the ProTill to handle whatever field or conditions you can throw at it. Degelman High Performance Equipment.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
Tough, precise, efficient. Strip tillage with the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm. Learn more at soilwarrior.com/agphd.
Your planter is the single most important piece of equipment on your farm, because without a uniform stand, you can't reach maximum yield. That's why Harvest International set out to design a planter that takes advantage of the newest innovations in planter technology. Built tough for high speed and integrated with the latest precision enhancements, Harvest International planters ensure every seed you plant today puts more in your bin at harvest. Harvest International, planting the future.
Tired of that old warped poly boom ruining your spray applications? Express Boom from Hypro is a fully assembled stainless steel boom that ensures an even application of chemicals every time. Don't wait another season, upgrade today. Hypro, helping you spray better.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
There are 6,272,640 square inches in an acre. We counted. Why? Because we designed the TigerMate 255 field cultivator and 2000 series early riser planter to maximize every single one. So when you create the most level seed bed in the industry and target a nickel-size area to plant a seed and never miss, you'll know in high-efficiency farming, there's one name to count on. Case IH. Rethink productivity. Learn more at caseih.com/everyinch.
In today's Iron Talk, we'll share 4 things that you need to know to make broadcast spray applications work best. First of all, it's important to start with the basics. The most common broadcast spray nozzles used on farms today are tapered nozzles. That means more product lands in the middle of the spray pattern than on the sides. Because of that, nozzles must have a nearly perfect pattern to apply product evenly across the fields. Your 2 action points here are before every season and several times throughout the season is to A, check the output of each nozzle to ensure that an even amount of product comes out, and B, watch the pattern of the nozzle. It's so cheap and easy to replace a nozzle. You can't afford not to replace one if it isn't functioning perfectly. Second on the list is boom height. To get the proper overlap, you must operate your boom at the proper height above the ground. Most people think that just means don't get too low, but it also requires you not to get too far above the crop. When your boom is several feet higher than the optimal range, you're obviously more susceptible to drift and poor coverage. In fact, labels on newer products like Extendamax specifically mention this. It's common sense. Third, nozzle spacing is something you likely would only change in the off-season. Putting the nozzles closer together allows you to operate the boom at a lower height above the crop. And finally, tip selection is another thing that you need to consider with every different application you make. For example, on our farm, we use either 3-way or 5-way nozzle bodies on our sprayers so we can quickly and easily change nozzles. Then just look at the free Ag PhD spray tip guide to select which nozzle will work best with the product that you're spraying. Watch your spray pattern, boom height, nozzle spacing, and tip selection closely, and you'll see better performance with everything you spray this year. If you follow these 4 steps, you'll be more successful controlling our weed of the week. But can you identify this week's weed?
At Estes Performance Concaves, we know how valuable your time is at harvest. That's why we designed the new XPR concave system. The XPR system is the #1 performance concave system on the market, surpassing the rest in both speed and efficiency, ensuring every last grain from your field gets into your tank. Plus, XPR concaves work for all row crops. No more changing concaves, meaning you have less downtime. Take back your bushels this harvest. Get Estes Performance Concaves in your combine today.
Invisible, invasive, underestimated. Nematodes are stealing over 10% of yields, and current protection methods aren't enough. But a breakthrough seed treatment technology controls nematodes when they attack. Now offering NemaStrike technology. It provides broad spectrum control from the start and stays in the root zone as plants grow. Take back your bushels with NemaStrike technology. Strike where nematodes attack.
In 1949, Morton Buildings constructed our first machine storage building to establish our bond with the farming community. Since then, our relationship has grown, and so have our product offerings. From the smallest specialized operation to the largest agricultural enterprise, we understand the needs of your business and continue to evolve to meet industry demands. Plus, when you build a Morton building, you're backed by the strongest warranty in the business. To learn more about the Morton Advantage, visit mortonbuildings.com.
Take a look inside any rotary combine, and you'll find single rotor technology. Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the axial flow combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an axial flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
If you were to rewind the clock and go back to when the HPPD family of chemistry first came out for corn, and Callisto specifically, you'd probably find a debate or two that Brian and I would have, and Brian would say, man, I like Status, and I would say, I like Callisto. Well, there are good things about both of those chemistries. We're going to talk today about which one might work for you in your cornfields this year.
Well, there are two different things we're always looking at. Number one, it's the agronomics, and two, it's the economics. So if we're strictly talking agronomics, I love Status. It's going to kill every broadleaf out there. It's phenomenal. It's got two different modes of action, one of which there's zero resistance in the world to. So I'm really excited to use Status. The problem is Status is about $15 an acre higher. So should I spend $3 or $4 on a herbicide, or should I spend $18 or $19 on a herbicide that'll do roughly the same thing? Oh, and by the way, HPPD will leave some residual. It is a good herbicide. It's going to kill almost all the weeds that Status will. I go, well, is it really worth that extra money? In most cases, it probably isn't.
Well, I've liked the HPPDs right from the beginning, from a crop safety and application flexibility timing thing. But here's the problem. Brian kind of hit at it. We've got two modes of action in Status. We've got one in the HPPDs. So what we're doing to utilize the HPPDs, we're mixing other things with them. So we're finding many farmers having success mixing a low rate of a straight dicamba, like maybe 6 ounces, depending on what kind of weed pressure you've got out there. A lot of times we're putting these HPPDs out with atrazine. Even a 1/4 pound of atrazine per acre seems to help. A 1/2 pound, even a little bit more. So we're adding a second or even a third mode of action in there just to avoid the weed resistance issues. We've already seen some farms where all they've used is HPPD all year, and we've got a problem. We also have some issues in certain soils and in fields that are odd shaped, where we might double up on the rate, where we could have a carryover issue too, where we don't seem to have those issues with Status. So there are some reasons why if you're going to use HPPDs, you may use some caution.
Darren mentioned carryover. We get very concerned about that with certain crops. So yes, if you're raising corn and sorghum and soybeans, it's not a real big concern. But if it is some other crop, then take a look at the label. And I'd just say this, we want to be extra cautious with any carryover potential.
Where I get really concerned about carryover is when pre's that include HPPD products are used, and farmers don't always realize it because they're in premixes and may choose an HPPD post because it's a cheaper option. So you want to be really cautious about, hey, what did I use for that pre? Or if you haven't got a pre out there yet and you say, man, I'm about to spray my pre right now, ask some questions. Look at what's in there. You can check out tools like the Ag PhD Mode of Action app to find out what's in some of these premixes so you can see, oh, I've got an HPPD there, I got to be cautious, I got to use something different post. But if you do use that HPPD option up pre, there really aren't a whole lot of choices post.
Yeah, so just to be clear, if you're going to use an HPPD pre, we do not want you to use one post. Only use an HPPD herbicide once per season.
Well, it is tempting, though, to use those HPPDs, either post or pre, because they've got some pretty good soil residual. I remember when the HPPDs first came out, I worked with a lot of seed production growers, and if you've ever seen the fields where they detassel or even kill that male row out, all of a sudden the canopy is gone, and late weed pressure is a problem for those growers. And when Callisto came out, wow, the fields were clean late into the season, and growers were really happy that they got some residual control. It's even more so out of some of those pre's where they're using a double rate of an HPPD early. They get some pretty nice residual control. Now, it's not like Status doesn't have any residual. It's got a little bit of dicamba in there. There's a little bit of residual, but we're talking maybe a week or two compared to a month or two.
All right, the last big question that I get about the HPPDs and Status is, how much grass control will I get out of that? And do I even need to throw Roundup with it if I have Roundup corn? If you have Roundup corn, my advice is always going to be throw the Roundup with it. It doesn't cost very much, and Roundup still kills about 99% of weed species out there. Yes, there are a few that are resistant, but Roundup is amazing on most grasses, and Status and any of the HPPDs are not. Specific HPPDs, like for example, Loudus and Impact, are a little bit better than Callisto, but none of them are going to be perfect if you have a lot of grass out there, and especially if it's over an inch tall.
There's certainly some key differences between Status and the HPPD products for broadleaf control in corn. I'm just glad we have lots of choices, because when you have tough weeds like our Weed of the Week, you're going to need to pick the right one. We'll show you which products work best coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
I love that today we're on my great-grandpa's farm, because one of the toughest weeds that he had to fight was our Weed of the Week, Canada Thistle. My great-uncle, when he kind of turned over the reins on this farm to Brian and me, he said, boys, I've been fighting Canada Thistle for 40 years, and now it's your turn. And fortunately for us, that fight didn't last too long, Brian.
No, it didn't. And in the early 1990s, we had kind of eliminated Canada Thistle on our farm with the use of Stinger. Stinger is an amazing Canada Thistle herbicide. You can't use it in soybeans, but you certainly can use it in corn and a number of other crops. So we'll talk today just a little bit about what Canada Thistle is and how best to control it on your farm.
Canada Thistle is a perennial with a very extensive rhizome system. So we often see a Canada Thistle patch maybe being 5 feet around. The next year it's 10 or 15 feet around. It just keeps growing because of those rhizomes. That's why I like Roundup, because it moves down through that system, but there are other choices as well.
The key thing, if you're going to get Canada Thistle under control, is not to do tillage. What we want to do is have you leave that Canada Thistle patch untilled, then go spray it and hit it with a good strong rate of whatever herbicide you're using so it can move down all the way through the root system, just like Darren was talking about with Roundup. Now, I do prefer Stinger in a lot of situations, but Roundup is an amazing herbicide too. Just don't cheat on the rate. What'll happen if you use a low rate is, yes, you'll burn some top growth, and yes, you'll get a little bit into the root system, but you won't kill every bit of the root system. You can absolutely, in 1 year, permanently eliminate a Canada Thistle patch if you use the right rate and you use the right timing and you don't do tillage first.
The pre-emerge herbicide program for corn, soybeans, and wheat is the same. All of the burn down type products like Sharpen, Gramoxone, 2,4-D, dicamba, you can fry off the top growth, but you really aren't going to get down into that root system like you will with Roundup. So I would recommend, as Brian said, no tillage, Roundup in a burn down at a high rate. Here's the other thing. We need to carry a lethal dose to every one of those growing points, so don't skimp on the Roundup rate.
Now, the other thing is, a minute ago when I said we can permanently eliminate that patch, I'm not counting seeds. If there are already seeds in the ground, yes, those certainly could start, but now you've got first-year plants. Those are certainly not as difficult to control as the great big patch that has the rhizomes.
Now, post-emerge in soybeans, you've got the new Enlist soybeans, so you could use Enlist 1. You've got Extend soybeans, so you could use one of the approved dicamba products. Those would be good options. They aren't going to be the complete elimination, but they'll at least eliminate Canada Thistle as competitors for this year's crop. In corn, I really like Status that we had talked about earlier in the show, and in wheat, you know, a lot of guys like to use 2,4-D, and I get it. You may need to use some 2,4-D in this system to try and take Canada Thistle out.
Yeah, but the big thing is with Canada Thistle, it's usually going early in the spring. And if you can hit it before you've actually planted a crop or before that crop has emerged, that's where you can use Roundup, because Roundup doesn't have residual, yet Roundup can go down into that root system and do a great job. But again, I just want to say the rate is unbelievably important. You have to get the right rate. When it's colder, you have to use even more. So use the maximum labeled rate. That's going to be our recommendation.
The last thing I'll add is in grass pastures, take a look at Milestone. That's a fantastic product for thistles. You could also look at the old Tordon, and if you use the appropriate rates, you can do a nice job wiping out that root system as well.
Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, but stay tuned. We've got a special segment for you coming up right after this.
Your planter is the single most important piece of equipment on your farm, because without a uniform stand, you can't reach maximum yield. That's why Harvest International set out to design a planter that takes advantage of the newest innovations in planter technology. Built tough for high speed and integrated with the latest precision enhancements, Harvest International planters ensure every seed you plant today puts more in your bin at harvest. Harvest International, planting the future.
Out here, great yield starts with great weed control. That's why I choose the Roundup Ready Extend crop system, the system that makes the difference, because only I know what it takes out here. Yield's what it's all for. But keeping my fields clean all season, that's what it's all about. This is my field.
At Estes Performance Concaves, we know how valuable your time is at harvest. That's why we designed the new XPR concave system. The XPR system is the #1 performance concave system on the market, surpassing the rest in both speed and efficiency, ensuring every last grain from your field gets into your tank. Plus, XPR concaves work for all row crops. No more changing concaves, meaning you have less downtime. Take back your bushels this harvest. Get Estes Performance Concaves in your combine today.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
Do you feel like there's never enough time to get everything done before planting? The window for spring work is quick and unforgiving. Give yourself the upper hand with the ProTill High Performance High Speed Disc. More and more farmers agree the ProTill is the right tool for springfield conditions and heavy residue management. Zero maintenance bearings, independent disc technology, oversized pins and bushings allow the ProTill to handle whatever field or conditions you can throw at it. Degelman High Performance Equipment.
During our last bit of time that we have with you here today, we wanted to talk just a little bit about our dad, Ron Hefty. He recently passed away. He was 77 years old, and you often hear us talking about the lessons that we learned from him on the farm and just in business, in agriculture in general. So we wanted to talk a little bit about him and just a little remembrance here at the end of the show today.
One of the things that I would say, Brian, is probably the first lesson that we learned from Dad is hard work. It started at a young age for us. We learned all those $5 an hour jobs that we talk about sometimes. While Dad was busy doing the $100 jobs, we were busy. And it really helped us because we got to learn the farm really from the ground up with all those little jobs first before we got to do the bigger, more fun jobs.
One of the things that I really appreciated is he gave us a lot of responsibility at a young age on the farm and in business. And I can just tell you, he would often put us into jobs where we were probably a little over our heads. He'd give us some explanation, and then undoubtedly we weren't doing it right when it came to check up on us. He was yelling at us all the time about stuff, but the point is it was do the job right. And you know, it's really hard to give all the instruction up front, so I understand it a lot now. I really didn't when I was growing up, but it was just nice to have all those opportunities. So at very young ages we were able to do a lot of things, and granted, he was really big on safety. He never did anything that put us in harm's way or anything like that, but we just got a lot of responsibility when we were young, and it was great.
Well, you talk about the business side too, and we always talked about money right from the beginning, and I see in so many farm operations it's different where they don't really mention that very much, and Dad was big on this is how much it costs and this is what we need for a return, and it really drove some of those main concepts that we talk about in our show. They're things we've talked about since we were pretty young kids and we really understood. In fact, Brian and I used to run a lot of the livestock operation on our farm, and we figured out one time that we could rent the facilities from Dad and do things.
We didn't figure it out. We worked out a deal with Dad.
Exactly, because we were talking about this all the time, and we figured out how to do this. And once we put those incentives out there, or we had those incentives, Brian and I worked really hard to make money. And when we figured out how to really make money, then Dad started rethinking that decision that, wow, maybe that's a little too much money for those guys to make early, and kind of pulled the reins back on that part of the operation. But it really got us going that we could see, you know what, when there's an incentive out there, we are willing to work hard, and that was a great lesson for us to learn.
So yeah, it was nice as we got a little older too, just bouncing a lot of things off our dad. And that was one of the things he talked about a lot too, because he moved from Iowa up here after he and our mom got married, and he didn't have his dad and his brother around anymore on the operation to bounce things off of. So
that might be okay not to work with your brother so closely. I don't know about that part. But.
Well, he was happy when Darren and I were back in the operation full time. So then he did have people to talk to about business every day. And even right to the end, I was talking to Dad about business shortly before he died, and I'm certainly going to miss that part of it as well.
Well, for all the hard work that Dad put in to set our farm up for success down the road, it was great for him to see some of the things later in life, like our opportunity to participate in the Rose Bowl parade, and certainly the Ag PhD Field Day was one that he really loved visiting with all of our viewers from around the country, and with the farmers from our area as well. I know that was a really fun day for him. We're sure going to miss him.
Couple last lessons. Estate planning. Our dad did a good job with that, so we don't have to worry about the future of Ag PhD and our farm and all those things that we had started with him years and years ago. And the other thing is, I just really encourage you, just make sure you're spending time with your parents and your family. Our mom passed away at age 40, our dad did at age 77 recently, and we're certainly going to miss them, but we really cherish the time that we were able to spend with them, and a lot of time over the years. That's all the time we have for today's show, but before we go, we want to invite you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show. We're on Sirius XM channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central each weekday.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.